Hey guys, Brandon Woolham hanging out in the CCM Cafe today with our friend Rita Springer. How are you?
Hey guys, good. So good to be here.
Yeah, these past couple of years, I keep seeing your name. We bring people in here, and I'm looking at the songs they got out, and it's featuring Rita Springer. Featuring Rita Springer. We had Todd Tillman a month or so ago featuring Rita Springer.
Yeah.
But now it's finally your turn.
Yes,
a new
I'm
album
back.
is coming. First album in 4 years, going to be out. It's in July or June.
Probably beginning middle.
One
of
of those
July.
2 months.
Yeah. Still working on it, but it's definitely a summer release.
Yeah, new singles out there now. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that one.
We put out a single on the 15th of March called "I Think He Is," which I think kind of sets up the record in kind of its full artistry. I think when you throw a song out there that's like I think he is, even though part of that chorus is that I know he is. I think it's creates this conversation for people to get ready for things that probably aren't the norm. And so this was a fun record because I didn't feel like I had perimeters and I had to say something exactly the way it was supposed to be said. So that was actually fun for me to color outside the lines a little bit.
Yeah, so if people don't know what you're talking about there, this album here, you did without any major label backing, no big investors out there.
Nope.
Maybe talk about the process of how you put this one out compared to all those other albums you put out.
I mean, everything that I put out, if people follow me at all, they're going to kind of recognize that I really believe God, as the head creator, has all the resource to tell you how to do something. And so I really engage conversation with the Lord on what do we do? How do we do this? And he's fascinating at what he starts to talk about. And so just saying, hey, look, I don't want to do it like this anymore. I don't want to do it like this. I don't have a label. I could maybe go scrounge up and get a label. We don't have distribution. I know enough people I could get distribution. But just having those conversations and then having conversations with some of the writers and the guy Benjamin Corporal, who is producing this, just talking in a different format of like, how do we do this? How do we do it and set it up for artists that are coming up, for a younger generation coming up that doesn't have the money to get, sucked into this big financial burden of all these things. And so we just kind of started a point system. And so the whole thing is kind of done in this generosity focused, we don't owe the big man nothing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of great. And we found a really beautiful distribution company called The Fuel Music here in town. They've just been amazing at setting up that whole, what that looks like for us. And so we'll see. I think it may be something that is newer. The record label is called R Records. It's Bede's label, and it's not a label. It's just a label that's kind of the. You
got to put something in that line.
Yeah,
when you submit your song, there's got to be something in there. You can't leave it blank.
Yeah, so it's been a fun process with that. That going along with how we're writing it, how we're doing it, it feels new and exciting and creative, and I'm not lame. Like, I don't want to just do what's always been done before. I think as an older artist, I'm always like, got my finger on the pulse of what's happening now, and really what is God saying? And again, I think we just have this all-consuming creative God who, made everything in the beginning. And so being like, what do you want? It's fascinating what he says.
Yeah. So it sounds like this is something that's going to be offered to other artists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that already being pitched, or are you going to test it out on yourself if it works?
I think we're testing it out, and I think it's conversations that that artists maybe when this project's done and we look at how it's going and how it's been set up, is a resource for other people. I always want to be a resource. I know that's Bede's heart too with our records, is that he wants to be a resource for that. And I think being an older artist, you should kind of set up the next generation for success in a way that isn't like just the machine that's constantly out there, which I'm not saying there's great things about the machine, right? It's the same thing there's beautiful things about smaller churches and beautiful things about bigger churches that look almost like a machine. And I've worked in both, and so you just glean from both. But I hope we can encourage people to do it a different way.
It'll be another resource tab on your website. You go to your website now, and it's just you keep scrolling. There's you got the podcast, of course, but you've got all these other ministries that are there. I'm trying to think of all of them.
I do mentoring.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Mentorship, and then
is
there's a
great.
Bible study on there too. I think that you do
sometimes
monthly.
well, sometimes we've done that where, I mean, I ran a school for 15 years called DIVE, which is an acronym for Deep Innovative Vertical Expression. And it's all about just encouraging artistry and creativity in a younger generation. I want to leave a legacy of constantly tutoring, mentoring, parenting, loving another generation and believing in another generation that they've got. I want to be able to throw life on another generation, say, hey, I took it this far, you take it to the moon. So that's my heart in all that.
Yeah, you talk about being an older artist several times there. Is there a point in your life where you see yourself maybe slowing down and just sitting back and watching everything? Because you got a lot going on. I can't picture myself, Rita Springer, slowing down when I look at all you're doing right now.
You know what I would have loved? I think the disservice that maybe making, having all the radio play or having like millions of dollars in royalties, I didn't have that. I learned the hard knocks way. I did it almost like, I always think about how Moses took the Hebrew people through the Red Sea. They could have gone an easier route, but he took them the harder route. And I've always kind of gone the harder route. But there's something that you learn in the harder route that you don't learn in the easy way. And so I think if I would have had like radio play and royalty checks, coming in all the time, I might have retired by now and gotten a beach house down in Florida and just been like, I'm done. But I think what it's done is it's kept me alive and it's kept me concerned about a coming generation who I just don't want to see caught up in the wheels of mechanics. I really want to encourage a generation that's coming behind me to be a creative generation that actually looks to the resource of heaven to get their creative juices flowing. I just think if we keep our hand and our heads leaning against the chest of the Lord, we're going to hear things that the world can't teach us. And that's my heart. So if I keep creating tabs on the website about all that, then I'll keep it going, because at least it's trying to teach a generation to keep moving toward creative expression.
Yep.
For sure. So
we talk about those tabs on your website. Yep. One of the tabs is the podcast.
Yep.
Lots of good stuff on that. Maybe tell people what to expect if they haven't heard the Rita Springer podcast yet.
Well, I think people, when they listen to me, I love to have candid conversations about things sometimes I don't think the church talks about. We don't talk about singleness in the church. We don't talk about, I don't even think we talk about adoption. I'm an adoptive parent, and just bad behavior in the church. Like that's a big subject, and people who don't act like Christ, those are just things that I'm like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why that doesn't work. Let's talk about why that hurts people. And let's talk about healing, and let's talk about coming back into the grace and mercy of maybe staring at the Lord a little more than we're staring at the preacher, and pulling in from what the Lord would say about a subject, as opposed to how we get caught up in opinion and conversation and all those things. And I want to talk about those things and bring people back to truth. So I think if you're gonna roll my podcast up, it's like she's a truth teller, and I want to have those conversations about truth.
Being a truth teller in the Christian world, sometimes we'll get you some negative comments, maybe some phone calls and voicemails. And we talked before you came on camera. There's some artists that have had shows canceled for doing stuff like that. Yeah. Was there ever a fear there, or you're not making big royalty checks anyway, so they can't take them from you?
Yeah, and honestly, when I talk about royalty checks, I usually will talk about a story years ago when the Lord came to me and just conversation. He said, "Hey, do you want royalty checks or do you want to raise the dead?" And it wasn't that you can't do both. Royalty checks are great. But I think there's a distraction sometimes where we lose the essence of our truth when we become distracted by the size of something that puts a competition between what the presence of the Lord could do and what a royalty check can do for you. And sometimes the presence of the Lord will lead you a harder route and will lead you to a place where you're getting accolades from heaven as opposed to the world. And that's a hard call for some artists. And I feel like the Lord was like, don't confuse the two. And so I migrated toward the spiritual side of it and have kept a sound mind and have kept even this place where I'm like, if people want to comment on stuff, I'm pretty put together to where I can actually see right through what they're saying or what they're missing. And when you're so full of opinion and that you want to respond with your opinion about something that's being said, it's kind of easy for me to be like, that's through the strain of opinion, or that's through the strain of their woundedness or their hurt or their failure or whatever. And so it's easy to be like, why respond back to that? That's not, it's just going to create a cesspool of nonsense.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
If people haven't got to tune into this podcast yet, they're hearing you talk here and they're like, this sounds awesome. I need to listen to this.
Well,
is there an episode that sticks out that you think should be the first one they listen to that would really give them?
I think for me the most surprising one was when I remember we were doing a podcast and the guy that films for me, I was like, you know what, just keep filming. I just want to talk about what I want to talk about. Because I was, in the beginning stages of it, kind of caught up in, you got to do it right for everybody, and you got to make everybody happy. And there is that part of us that all of us are we have a people-pleasing kind of mentality, and I still suffer from that occasionally. And so I just told my video guy, I'm like, just keep rolling it. And I just popped off on singleness, and that just kind of blew up. And I realized I think I need to stay in the lane of talking about the things that are important and the things that I know best about me. And so I think that was probably my favorite podcast because it's so raw, so real, so honest. There's so many single people out there. And just to be able to see, people need people to talk about what's real, and I think that just really encouraged me.
We take that same question, we kind of go to the album that comes out here in a few months. When people finally get to hear this full project, which song on there is one you really hope they go back, maybe listen to it 2 or 3 times, listen deep to the lyrics?
I think there's so many different ones. When people actually see what we've done on this project, there's synergy to it, and it's all in a package. But the way that we're talking about desperateness, the way we're talking about finding ourselves in situations where, I wanted to write a record. Obviously, it's called Fed by Ravens. So you have this, illustration of, out of Scripture, it's Elijah, giving a word to Ahab and in a very difficult time, and then prophesying a drought, and then the Lord saying, "Run for the hills. He's going to kill you now," which that's rough.
Yeah.
That's a rough position to be in. When you're being used by God, and then God's like, okay, what you've just done that's part of your gifting is going to cost you, so run for the hills. And in that place of his running, God actually feeds him and then dries up the place of water with the word that he gave. And so I think I wanted to put people back in a place where when you're walking through a really difficult time, it's really easy, Brandon, to sing songs about the miracle. We all want the songs about the miracle. And isn't that amazing? I love when God does a miracle. But my life has been a life filled with having to pursue the Lord without the miracle. And I think sometimes we could do a disservice in the church when we feed people the way to find the miracle is to dance this jig for the Lord, and then he'll give you the miracle. What happens when God's way is a little bit rockier and you don't get the miracle? Is God still who he says he is without the miracle? And I wanted to create a palette of that in this. So I think there's certain songs on that record that people will be like, that was my go-to because, this in my life is what that says. I mean, there's a song on that record that I play repeatedly, actually a couple of them, and one's just called Answer Me. And I think actually makes me emotional thinking about it because it's just a cry to the Lord about just, can you answer me? Can you please just throw me a bone here? Like, tell me that you're gonna do something here and get me out of this situation. So I think that kind of cry for so many people who are just like in that place where they're like, what in the world is the Lord doing? And there are moments in this record where they're almost like these exhales, where it's just like, yeah, man, I had a conversation with the Lord, and so I'm hoping that there'll be those moments on the record where people be like, geez, finally somebody who's a Christian's just saying it like it is, and believing that God is right there all the time in the middle of it, not leaving you, and holding on to every anguishing moment. So that's what my hope is for this record.
Yeah. And we're starting to see more of those albums. The past 6-7 months, those kind of albums have been coming out of Christian artists. We had Corey Asbury, who put out a singer-songwriter album that was not all worship-filled. It was real life. And that's something I talked to artists in interviews about for the past couple of years, trying to get inside their head. I came from secular rock and roll, where the topics were often mental health and people coming out of drug addiction and real life stuff. And I came to Christian music, and it was just, everything was happy. And I'm like, am I living wrong? Because my life's not that happy all the time still. And I would ask worship artists, like, if there are times you write songs, even if it's not on a worship record, just for yourself. And I think everybody was always afraid to even tell me if they've dabbled in that. So it's been exciting to see these past 6 months, songs coming out that people can listen to, even if they're not a Christian, and think, wow, they're experiencing the same stuff I am.
Absolutely.
Maybe I need to pursue this
I think
life.
every decade, I always talk about the train that has to hit the side of the church building and wake it up a little bit and shock it.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a train that hits the industry side of the building too, where it's like, you know, I remember back in the day talking to some labels here, and they were perplexed because they had just gotten a hold of a kind of a somewhat worship band in England that they're like, nobody ever here will ever do their songs. And I'm like, what band is that? And they're like, Delirious. And I'm like, we were already singing their songs, but they were like, their songs are too wordy, their songs, and then Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble hit, and all these, and I think it just takes an honest artist listening to the Lord with the power of that belief and the power of God's creative expression behind him to slam inside the side of the industry, Christian Industries building or a church building, and say, wake up, oh you sleeper, and free yourself from these chains around your neck, because something new is coming. Now can't you feel it? And I think we are in a season in the church and in the Christian industry where God is actually quoting again Isaiah, you know, spring up now, it's coming. Like there's something new, there's a new song coming, and it springs up, which in scripture is basically saying, you may not be ready for it, but it's coming anyway. And so that's okay with me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, y'all may not be ready for it, but it's coming anyway. So,
and if you're ready for more of this kind of talk, you can get it in the Rita Springer podcast. She's got all kinds of it.
Awesome.
If you need just short clips, she's got the real versions on her social media. You can get a bunch in 90 seconds, so you don't even have to like spend all day listening to the podcast. New album's out mid-July is the goal. No official date yet.
Mid-July, no official date, but we have single releases that are coming more and more. So just stay tuned.